no problem. When I started working on sustainability, I never expected to be known as the guy who lives off the grid in Manhattan. There's something like 8 billion people on the planet right now, of whom more than half live in cities. That means that I somehow have ended up becoming the first of 4 billion people. This is really hard for me to wrap my head around, to do something that anyone could do. I mean, there are a lot of people living in cities who don't have electricity. And well, okay, they're also not getting off of the grid. And this has led to lots of other things. The last time I flew was 2016. The last time I filled up a load of garbage was 2019, just before the pandemic. And, you know, when I was preparing for this talk, Mark here in the group said to me, you know, not everyone has the science background that you do. And so maybe not everyone can do the things that you've been able to do. And I'm going to tell a story about, you know, I knew the science. I have a PhD in physics. I helped launch a satellite that's going around the world. But for years, most of my life, I didn't act despite knowing the science. I knew the science, I think, as well as anyone, you know, pretty high up there. And I didn't really know what to do. I felt helpless. I felt like, well, what I do doesn't matter. It wasn't until I'm going to tell a story on, it may sound like I'm digressing for a bit. I started a business a long time ago, and it was a really cool business. It was an invention of mine that we would put boxes on the walls of subway tunnels that when the train went by, it looked like a movie screen outside the subway car window. Some people have seen these things. The business had its ups and downs. Personally, while I was running the business, there was also something, the medium itself, and I wish I could show it to you, but I can't show it to you, but it's really, really cool. There's no medium like it. And it led to people really wanting to see it. So a friend of mine had some friends who ran a dance club, kind of nice place. And he said, you got to show it to them. I showed it to them. They said, can you put this in our VIP room? Because it looks really good in the dark. So I did. Not long after that, a gallery owner saw it and invited me to show in his gallery. Now, I have no background in art, so I wasn't able to make the images that went, I made the medium, but I had to work with friends who were artists, and they would make the images that would go in the display. I would make the display. It went into the VIP room. That led to a gallery show. That led to another gallery show. I've had pieces in museums. I showed at the Art Basel Miami Beach, which is like the biggest thing in the US. And pardon me, I actually ended up teaching classes in art at NYU Tisch, which is their School of the Art, and Parsons. Always, or actually for most of this time, using other people's images in my displays. When I would try to make images myself, people would look at them and say, I don't really get it. They wouldn't really like my stuff. But I kind of wanted to show my own stuff. And so I kept working at it. And every now and then someone would say, hey, that's something interesting you've got there. And so I would go in that direction and pursue a little bit more and push and push and push. And eventually I found that simplifying helped a lot. I would copy from others, but the more simple I made it, the more people would respond to it. And eventually I reached where I found some software where I could make images that were just very basic line, shapes, color, very simple motions. And one time, to my great surprise, as I was putting together some of the pieces some of the images that I'd created, I looked at one piece, and for the first time I thought, that's art. I made art by myself. I was very proud of this. And once I started being able to work with just the basics, the absolute basics, I then started to build from there to more things that I could do. And I discovered beyond the colors and shapes and form and line, there were things like rhythm and composition and these higher level things. And I started realizing, oh, I should learn this theory. And I started learning the theory of like art theory and how to make things better. And it occurred to me, I'd taken art classes before. I didn't have zero background in art. I'd taken classes in school. They were generally art history and art appreciation, but there were a few classes generally in grade school where it was actually making art. And the teachers had taught me about these things like composition and form and line. They had taught me theory, but it had never turned into practice. It's very tempting to think if I teach someone theory, they'll know what to do and they'll be able to act on it. Sometimes that does happen. if you get lucky, you can tell someone something and they happen to like it and they go for it. But that's rare. Much more commonly, it works the way that it did for me with art, which is that actually doing things practice leads to theory more than theory leads to practice. In sustainability, I knew all the theory and I never really acted on it. What got me going was that I did do these little experiments. The first big one for me was when I would avoid I challenged myself to avoid packaged food for 1 week. Now, New York City has some of the best food in the world. A lot of it's packaged, flown in from all around the world. And I thought, well, I'm taking one for the team. I'm sacrificing here. I'm losing out. I was very pleasantly surprised to find that when I actually tried, I enjoyed it. My food actually tasted better. Well, I did have to go through a period of experimentation and learning how to cook from scratch, learning how to shop from scratch, because I didn't know at first. But when I did learn, it was faster, more convenient. It was cheaper. It tasted better. And for that matter, it helped people who don't have access. I have farmers markets here, not everyone does, but it helps bring farmers markets to them. And so I started working on things like that. And that led me to start doing other things and other things and other things, including going off the grid first in 4 billion. Who expected it? Not me. And here, I'm going to tell you guys something that I tell a lot of people, and most people don't believe me. There's absolutely nothing that I'm doing that is remotely sacrifice. I'm living in more abundance now of what matters to me than ever. Now, as someone who practices leadership, I coach and teach leadership. I recognized this was intrinsic motivation that I found. And every message I'd gotten before had said, you have to do this. You don't want to, but you have to. We all have to. But as a leader, when I saw or when I experienced that feeling of reward, that intrinsic motivation, I realized that can motivate people in a way that I had not seen anyone even try. People were telling me facts and expecting me to act. But much more effective is, well, for me personally, to try things out and find something that I liked. But what I've developed is now called the Spodek method, is a way to talk to people, to evoke from them the relevant emotions, their intrinsic motivation that are relevant to the environment, to sustainability. When I evoke that emotion and I connect that and I have them, or I connect that to a task that's sustainability related, they do it for their reasons that existed before I ever met them, and reasons that generally when you say Bangladesh is going to be underwater and therefore you must do this, it actually suppresses that feeling or leads them to deny it or push it away. Not everyone, but that's in my experience, that's been the case. Whereas if I evoke from them these emotions and I connect those emotions to a task, and then they do that task, it may be big or small. That's not my point. It's going to be rewarding to them. And if it's rewarding and meaningful, they'll want to do it again. Routinely, when I do the Spodek method with someone, after they do, and I lead them to share an emotion, connect that emotion to something that they pick that they do, when I ask them, how did it go afterward? Very often they do more than they said that they would. And they want to do yet more, and they start looking things up. How can I do more? How can I find out more theory? So I want to wrap with, it's tempting. It's very, actually, because we learn how to do, after we practice something, we then generally reinforce doing it by learning the theory. And we think, well, the theory is why I do it. But that's not usually why we changed, why we started. We often start for different reasons. So what I want to close with is, it's very tempting to give people facts and knowledge and expect them to do things on that. It often is counterproductive. If we can listen to them, hear what they have to say, listen in a way that's conveying non-judgmental support from me, then they can feel comfortable, because often what motivates people makes them feel vulnerable. Our greatest passions are also our greatest vulnerabilities. If you know what motivates me, you can manipulate me, you can laugh at me, you can make fun of me. But I actually want you to know these things. So if I can talk to someone so that they can feel comfortable sharing those things with me, and I can connect those things to a task, they will generally do more and want to do yet more. What I now teach, much more than the science. I'll respond to questions that people ask, but what I want to do is to teach them how to evoke from others those emotions so that they act on those things. And they can teach the others to teach others, to teach others, to teach others joy, freedom, liberation. Because when we liberate each other and we want to do these things, then it becomes a self-reinforcing, self-accelerating movement. That's what I'm all about. It's nice to be off the grid. I really enjoy it. I live in more abundance than ever. But my game is really to get a movement going where it accelerates because people find joy. When they share it with others, the others express gratitude, and they respond to that gratitude by helping them to teach others, to teach others, to teach others. I'd love to take questions, and thank you very much.
Who's
I'm not
are
sure.
you? Hi,
Do I moderate or?
Shanine, are you facilitating the questions or is somebody else? No. Shall I do it?
I can do it, or if you want
Go
to
on,
do
then.
it.
No, you go. You do it. You do it, Shanine. Sorry.
Yes, we had one question. Randy, if you'd like to ask your question.
Thank you for your presentation. Can you tell us a story of a particular person or a time that you told a story that motivated them to action like you described? It sounds wonderful, but tell us a story.
Yes, I have hundreds of stories. And if you go to my podcast, This Sustainable Life, you can hear me doing it with politicians and CEOs and athletes and things like that. I'll pick one just because this is for many Americans rather surprising. I had on my podcast a very staunch Trump supporter. So I was recording, it's audio only, but we were recording in video, and behind this giant sign saying Trump 2024 or something like that, or 2020, I think. And when I asked him what the environment meant to him, and this was, you can hear it's there online for you to listen to. And so if I get any facts wrong, remind me, because memory's funny. When I asked him what the environment meant to him, he gave an answer that was different than most people. He talked a lot about small town America. He lives in a small town, and cities, you know, they're very polluted and dirty, and small towns he really likes, but he's seen that the small towns are becoming more polluted. And when I asked him through the process, I'm skipping steps here, what he could, if there's anything he could do to act on this passion for small town America, he said, yeah, you know, he goes through 4 bottles of Gatorade a day, which that's got issues separate. But he said, you know, I just throw those out. Why don't I recycle those? I've heard about recycling. Now, did I say to him, plastic recycling doesn't really do that much? No, that's not where he was. I let him go. And when I talked to him, I think he was doing it for a month. I said, how did it go? And he said, oh, it was really interesting because he got into it with his girlfriend. So they did it together. And the amount of trash that he produced was much less because these Gatorade bottles add up. Also, he went with her to the recycling place and he got the recycling back. He got the, he gets a little money for it. I think he said it was like $6. Now, that's not serious money, he said. The point wasn't the $6. It was just that it was fun. It was something he said, and this, he said, to American ears, this will sound very unusual. A Trump supporter said, everyone should do this. Everyone should recycle. I didn't say that he would like it. I had no idea before I spoke to him that small town America would be his connection to nature. There's no way I could have known that except that he told me. Even if I could guess it, if I'd said it and he hadn't told me, and even if I guessed right, he would think, did he really know? Or was he just lucky? But because he told me I could act on something that he shared with me. So I've got hundreds, maybe thousands of stories like that by now. If you want me to share more, I can share more.
Randy?
Oh, I was going to say that's a wonderful story. It's very concrete, and it had a happy ending. And it makes me think, well, I myself dismissed a lot of these people as hopeless, but you just asked him what was important to him, and then it went from there.
Yeah, there's a process I go through of asking a set of questions. I don't start with what's the environment mean to you? I have to lead up to it. I ask for and by the way, I lead workshops in this, and I invite any of you who are interested to, I guess I'll put a link in the box that I teach how to do this. So first I have to establish a relationship where I convey, I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to shame you. I'm very interested in these things. And I also have done it enough that I've come to take for granted. People want to share these things. People have these experiences. Everyone. I mean, if you want to teach someone to play violin or to play a sport, some might like it, some might not. And it might work, it might not work. But with the environment, everyone has some experience. Even if they grew up in a favela, even if they grew up in a slum and there was only some tree or some soccer patch where they play nearby, there's still something there. So I know that there's something there. And I asked them to share it. I asked them to share their sensory experience. What do they see and hear and touch and smell? And then I asked what emotions they felt there. And so this process, now called the Spodek method, it's come through hundreds and thousands of times practicing, and based on a lot of leadership theory that went into it. From, I have a book, I can't see it now, but my book's back there, on leadership. So there's a lot of theory and practice baked into it. So I don't just ask. And it takes people, when they learn the Spodek method, it takes them, I don't know, 5 or 10 times before they get really comfortable with it. You got to put in your reps, just like playing a sport or playing a musical instrument. It's a performance art.
Well, you're reminding me of my brother. I have a Trump supporter brother who would die before he talked about environmentalism. But he feels very strongly that the creek behind his house should be clean. So he hauled out amazing amounts of stuff. And a couple of years ago, the salmon started running it. Not many, it's a tiny creek. But he would do that for any creek you point at, because that's what mattered to him.
Yeah, I find it absolutely universal. And I'm going to throw in a curveball here too, that I work oftentimes very staunch liberals who claim to be very sustainable. After they do this, like this one, Evelyn, who is now, she took my workshop last year, then she started TAing it, and now she leads workshops herself. And when she first heard about sustainability leadership, my work, she didn't say this out loud until later. She said, she thought, look, Josh, I live in Oregon. I'm one of the good guys. I do everything right, and after she started acting and realizing that there was joy to be had and liberation and discovery, she looked back at the way she felt before and she was like, I was just self-righteous. I just said stuff, but I didn't actually change my behavior. And because I didn't change my behavior, I was unable to change anyone else's behavior. So there's a lot of people also who, I don't know how to put it, because I don't want to put them down. They just haven't realized, they're still in the theory mode. They're still talking a lot, and they haven't yet discovered how much more enjoyable living sustainably can be. There's a big belief. A lot of people have this inner belief that if we, like, maybe I'll avoid straws because they saw the video with the turtle. But they often feel like, well, that's okay. I want to avoid straws. But if I keep going down this path, well, the economy might fall apart, and then the tax base will erode, and we can't have hospitals and police, and society will fall apart, and we'll revert back to the Stone Age. And so they might do the first step, but they might not take any steps past that. And they won't tell you. They might not even be consciously aware that something is blocking them from continuing. This kind of conversation, there's a big shift that happens before. People often talk about the conversations like paper or plastic, this theoretical talk. Afterward, it's what more can I do? How can I share this with others? Very, very different conversations.
Thank you, Josh. I have when I'm speaking to people about sustainability and what they can do, there does seem to be a blinkered view about, well, it's all about corporations and governments, and nothing I do is going to really make a difference. So I have similar conversations, maybe not as structured as yours, but I do find that people have these blinkers about sustainability and the environment.
I find that a lot of what people say, it sounds like it's a logical, reasonable conversation. Oftentimes they have internal doubts and fears and inhibitions, and they're actually protecting themselves. And if you engage on the debate, they will debate back with you. And that often leads them to reinforce these things that led them to say it. Often when people say this dichotomy between individual action versus systemic change, to me, the big shift is really extrinsic motivation versus intrinsic motivation. When they're motivated, people are motivated, say, I can't wait to take on government. I'm going to change government. people are demotivated, say, oh, government, they're the ones that have to change.
Yeah.
But
True.
you can't logic someone into that.
No. Has to
Much
come
more
from themselves.
experiential.
Ron has his hand up. Ron, would you like to ask Josh a question?
Well, it's kind of a question. It might be a new song. Josh, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking of Paul Simon's song, 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover.
Mhm.
And if we went to your website, would we find 50 ways to start sustainability on the environment side and 50 ways to start sustainability by challenging government?
Great question. And I'll be quick just because I see that the yellow thing's up. That if you go to my page now, you'll see the page that's my old page. My book, as of last night, I finished the last revisions of I sent it to my editor, my publisher. So later this year, the webpage will change and it will have one thing to do. And that one thing to do is to learn the Spodek method. Prior to the mindset shift that the Spodek method gives, people view it as a burden. Before the shift, after the shift, it's something they want to do, that they get to do. And that is my number one thing, is to be able to give yourself and others this mindset shift through this process that I described. After that, it's like swimming downstream instead of upstream. Sorry, I have to wait a bit for the webpage to change. I'm developing the online course, but the workshop is the other thing that is that works very well. And I'll put it's red, so I'll stop, but I'll put the link in the chat of more information about the workshop. And thank you.
You know, what you're saying, though, it's all a question of psychology. And I'm looking at 17 people on the screen here. Most of them are members of our club and a few guests. That's something we could do. We could do 50 ways to start and take that example that you've talked about, engaging people, get them to think about some joy that's there. I like that approach.
I like it too. And it's much more fun to work with people after they've done this. And we're just like, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do? Some of it is what can we do ourselves? And some of it is how can we affect others? Some of it is how can we change systems? But it's joy. It's coming from within.
Thank you so much, Josh. Really appreciate your speech and your question and answer session. Thank you very much. Please, everyone, give a huge round of applause to Josh. Thank you.